The sound of 300 champagne flutes hitting a marble floor at once is something I will never forget for the rest of my life. It wasn't the crash itself that froze me. It was the half second of silence right before it. When I saw my sister's hand connect with the edge of the table, when I saw the whole tower sway, when I knew exactly what was about to happen and couldn't do a single thing to stop it. And then my sister looked straight at me, in front of 67 people, and said, "Maybe if you weren't so desperate for everyone to feel sorry for you, you wouldn't have been in the way." I was on a set of forearm crutches. I'd been for 8 months. And she had just knocked me into a $12,000 champagne tower at her own baby shower. Let me back up. My name is Avery. I'm 31 years old. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and until about 14 months ago, I had what most people would call a pretty normal life. I worked as a project coordinator at a mid-sized logistics company downtown. I had a good apartment, a rescue dog named Biscuit, a solid group of friends. My relationship with my family was complicated, the way a lot of people's families are complicated. But I managed it. I showed up for holidays. I kept the peace. I did what you do. My sister's name is Jolene. She's 34. She has always been, without question, the center of our family's universe. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I used to. But I've done a lot of work to move past it. It's just a fact, the way some families have a son that everything else orbits around. Jolene was ours. She was the one who got the car at 16. The one who had her college tuition paid in full while I took out loans. The one whose work stories our parents repeated at dinner like gospel. The one whose opinion on everything, what I should wear, who I should date, whether my apartment was too far from the family, was delivered freely and accepted as wisdom by everyone except me. I loved my sister. I want to be clear about that. Even now, on the other side of everything that happened, I can say that I loved her. I just also knew, from a very young age, that her love for me had conditions I could never quite meet. The accident happened on a Thursday morning in late October. I was driving to a site visit. My job sometimes required me to check inventory at warehouses outside the city. It was early, just past 7, one of those grey fall mornings where the sky looks like dirty dishwater and you're still half asleep. I was on the interstate doing 62, nowhere near the exit yet. I don't remember the impact. I remember the sky being in the wrong place, seeing it through what should have been my side window. And then nothing until I woke up in Vanderbilt University Medical Center with my mother's hand on my arm and a doctor telling me I had a fractured pelvis, a shattered left ankle, a broken right wrist, and nerve damage in my lower left leg that they were still assessing. A semi-truck had drifted across 2 lanes. The driver had fallen asleep. 3 surgeries, 14 weeks inpatient and acute rehab, 8 months on crutches, with the realistic possibility, which my physical therapist delivered gently but clearly, that I might be on them for significantly longer, or permanently, depending on how the nerve damage progressed. I was 29 years old and learning to walk again. Here is the thing about serious physical injury that nobody really tells you. The pain is only part of it. The other part, the part that grinds you down slower and deeper, is the way it changes how people see you. Some people become incredibly kind. My friends from college took turns flying in to sit with me. My coworker sent a card signed by everyone in the office. My manager held my position open for as long as the company policy allowed, and then called me personally to tell me how sorry he was when it ran out. My family was a different story. My mother cried the first time she saw me in the hospital. Genuine, scared tears, I believe that. But within 3 weeks, the tears had dried up and been replaced by a kind of impatience I recognized from childhood. The impatience of someone who finds illness inconvenient. She would visit and spend the first 10 minutes asking how I was feeling and the remaining 40 talking about Jolene. Jolene had just found out she was pregnant. Jolene and her husband were looking at houses in Brentwood. Jolene was thinking about whether she wanted a gender reveal party or just a small announcement dinner. I was learning how to transfer from a bed to a wheelchair without falling on the floor, but sure. Tell me more about the gender reveal. My dad is a quieter version of the same problem. He loves me, I think. But he has always taken my mother's emotional temperature as his own, and since my mother had decided that my recovery was secondary to Jolene's pregnancy, my dad had decided that too. I came home to a temporary ground floor rental that my friends helped me find. because my own apartment was on the third floor with no elevator in January. By March, I was on forearm crutches. By April, I was attending outpatient PT 3 days a week and having what I can only describe as a private grief process over a body that no longer worked the way it used to. Jolene called me in March to tell me she was having a girl. "I want you to be at the shower," she said. "It would mean so much to me." I said, of course, because I loved her, because I was trying. The baby shower was in May, at a venue in Green Hills, one of those renovated farmhouse spaces that gets rented out for events, with exposed brick and Edison bulbs and a catering minimum of $4,000. Jolene had wanted something elegant but cozy, her words. There were 67 guests. There was a champagne tower. There was a custom floral arrangement that I later found out cost more than my monthly physical therapy co-pays. I arrived with my forearm crutches and a gift I had spent real time picking out. A handmade quilt from an Etsy shop in Vermont, a white noise machine that a friend who's a pediatric nurse had recommended, and a gift card to a baby boutique in the Gulch that Jolene had mentioned twice. I had wrapped everything carefully. I had asked my friend Cassidy to drive me because I still couldn't drive myself. For the first hour, things were fine. People were kind, or at least politely careful. A few women I didn't know asked what happened and made the face, that particular face people make at injuries, the small wince of sympathetic horror. And I gave my usual short answer and moved the conversation forward. Then Jolene made her entrance. She had timed it. I don't know why I was surprised. She had always had a theatrical instinct. But she came in through a side door while guests were mid-conversation, and the room shifted around her the way rooms always shift around Jolene. She was 34 weeks along and genuinely beautiful, in a sage green dress with her hair down, and I felt the familiar feeling I always feel watching my sister walk into a room. Half admiration, half something lonelier. She came over and hugged me, carefully, around my crutches. "I'm so glad you made it," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. For about 40 minutes, I let myself believe the day was going to be okay. Then her mother-in-law, a woman named Patricia, who has never once in 3 years of family events acknowledged me as a complete person, said something to Jolene just loud enough for me to catch. I was behind them, reaching for a glass of sparkling water from a tray on the side table. "Is she going to be like this forever?" Patricia said, nodding in my direction. "Like this, on crutches, inconvenient, a visual disruption at an otherwise Instagrammable event." Jolene said something back that I didn't catch, and Patricia laughed, and something that had been sitting quietly in my chest for 8 months started to crack. I moved away, found a seat near the champagne tower, which was set up at the edge of a long display table. 3 tiers of crystal flutes stacked in that precarious way you see at upscale events, around 400 glasses in all, which the venue coordinator had told me a check-in cost $12,000 to set up and would be a total loss if anything happened to it. I was sitting resting my legs when Jolene found me again. She was smiling, but there was something underneath it. "You could try a little harder," she said quietly, leaning down. "You've been sitting in the corner for 20 minutes. People notice." I looked at her. "Jolene, my legs hurt. Everyone here has made an effort to be present," she said. "I just need you to not make this about you." I stared at her. "I'm sitting in a chair." "You always do this," she said, and her voice got that specific flattened quality it gets when she's decided something. "You always find a way to make sure everyone's looking at you instead of just being happy for me." I said quietly, "I was in an accident. I almost died. I'm standing here on crutches at your baby shower because I love you. Please don't do this today." "I'm not doing anything," she said. "I'm just asking you to make an effort." And then she straightened up, and her voice went back to its bright public register, and she said, loudly enough for the 3 women standing nearby to hear, "We're so glad Avery could make it. She's been going through a lot. She gets overwhelmed easily." I felt my face go very still. I have heard a lot of things said about me in the context of my recovery, that I was being dramatic, that I should be further along by now, that other people have dealt with worse, but gets overwhelmed easily, said in that specific tone at a public event in front of people I didn't know. That was a particular kind of dismissal I'd never been handed so openly before. I said still quietly, "That's not what I said." Jolene turned back toward me, and something shifted in her expression, some combination of embarrassment and anger that I had not quietly absorbed it, and she said, "Can you just not do this? Just for one day. Stop making everything a tragedy." "Jolene, nobody here thinks your crutches are that interesting," she said. "Not everyone who trips and falls ends up making it their whole personality." The room didn't hear all of it, just the women nearby, but they heard enough and I saw them go still. And then my sister turned away from me, toward the table, and her elbow caught the edge of the display cloth. I don't know if she did it on purpose. I have gone back and forth on this so many times in the months since that I have stopped trying to decide. What I know is that she grabbed the cloth and pulled it sharply toward her, whether to catch herself or for some other reason, and the champagne tower went, all 400 glasses, the entire $12,000 structure. It came down in stages, the way towers do. First a lean, then a slide, then a cascade, then the full crash, and the sound was enormous in that farmhouse space, echoing off the brick walls, and then there was a half-second of pure silence before 67 people started reacting. I had moved back on instinct when I heard the first glasses go. My right crutch clipped the edge of the table. I didn't fall, but it was close. I grabbed the back of a nearby chair and held on while the world crashed next to me. When the sound stopped, Jolene was standing in the middle of broken glass and spilled champagne, and she looked at me, and she said it. "Maybe if you weren't so desperate for everyone to feel sorry for you, you wouldn't have been in the way." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. I looked at my sister. I looked at the glass around my crutches. I looked at the glass around my crutches. I looked at the 60-odd women staring at both of us. And then I said, clearly and calmly, "I need to go." Cassidy was at my side before I made it 3 steps. She'd been watching from across the room. She took my arm and we walked out, and she didn't say a single thing until we got to the car, at which point she turned to me and said, "What in the absolute hell?" My right crutch had caught the table edge hard enough that the rubber tip had cracked. It wasn't anything worse than that, physically. But my ankle, the shattered one, the one that had been reconstructed with 3 plates and 11 screws, had twisted when I grabbed for the chair, and by the time I got home it was swelling. By evening I could barely put weight on it. My physical therapist, Dr. Okafor, assessed it the next morning. The twist had strained some of the scar tissue around the reconstruction site. Not a re-fracture, thank God, but a significant setback. She estimated 4 to 6 weeks of lost progress, possibly more. 4 to 6 weeks, 8 months of work. I sat in her office and I cried for the first time since the accident. Not because of the pain, because I was so tired. Dr. Okafor put her hand on my shoulder and said, "This is not your fault." I know it wasn't. But knowing something and feeling it are 2 different countries. My mother called that evening. "Jolene is very upset," she said. I waited. "The venue is saying they're going to charge her for the champagne tower. She's really stressed about it." "Mom," I said, "my ankle set back 4 to 6 weeks." There was a pause. "I know, honey, but she's 34 weeks pregnant. The stress isn't good for her. The stress isn't good for me either." "You're not 34 weeks pregnant." I hung up. I have a therapist. Her name is Dr. Whitmore, and I have been seeing her since February, when I finally admitted to myself that what I was experiencing was not just physical recovery, but something that required actual psychological help. I called her that night and left a message, and she fit me in the next day. I told her everything. The shower, the crutch, the ankle, the tower, the thing Jolene said, my mother's phone call. Dr. Whitmore listened. Then she said something I've thought about almost every day since. "What do you want the outcome of this to be?" I didn't know yet, but I started thinking about it. Here is what I found out over the next 2 weeks. The venue had already sent Jolene a bill for the champagne tower, $11,800. Jolene had, according to a text she sent to our cousin Meredith, that Meredith forwarded to me with a 3-alarm fire level of concern, told the venue that I had knocked into the tower and that I was therefore responsible. I had not knocked into the tower. 2 guests had filmed portions of the incident on their phones. Cassidy had seen the whole thing from across the room. The venue's own event coordinator, who had been standing 15 feet away, had witnessed it. But Jolene had told the venue it was my fault, and the venue had sent a collections notice to my address because Jolene had given them my contact information. $11,800. To my address. For a champagne tower I did not knock over. I called an attorney. Her name is Sandra, and she was referred to me by a co-worker who had used her in a civil matter. She reviewed the collections notice, I sent her the 2 guest videos, and she called me back the same afternoon. This is straightforward, she said. The video shows clearly that you did not cause the tower to fall. You have 2 independent witnesses plus venue staff as a potential witness. If the venue pursues this against you, we respond with the video evidence and a demand that the bill be redirected to the responsible party. What about the injury? I asked. The setback to my ankle. There was a brief pause. Tell me more about that. I did. Dr. Pennew. Okafor had already documented the setback in my file. The date, the mechanism of injury, the impact on my recovery timeline. Sandra said she wanted to speak with Dr. Okafor's office directly and that she'd be in touch. 2 days later, Sandra called again. I want to talk about a personal injury claim. I had not considered this. I want to be honest about that. When I called Sandra, I was thinking about the champagne tower bill. The idea that what my sister had done, the public humiliation, the ankle setback, the months of additional recovery, constituted something legally actionable had not fully formed in my mind yet. Sandra explained it carefully. Jolene's actions had directly caused a physical setback to an existing injury, documented by a medical professional. There was video evidence of the incident. There were witnesses to the verbal exchange that preceded it. A personal injury claim was not just possible. It was, in Sandra's view, reasonably strong. I want you to think about what you want, she said. Not what you think you're supposed to want, what you actually want. I thought about Dr. Whitmore's question. What do you want the outcome to be? I didn't want my sister in prison. I want to be honest about that too. What I wanted was for someone to look at what had happened, at all of it, the 8 months of being made to feel like a burden in my own family, the shower, the tower, the ankle, my mother's phone call and say, this was wrong. This caused real harm. This has a cost. I filed the claim. What followed was 4 months of the ugliest thing I have ever been part of. Jolene denied everything. Not just the tower. She denied the verbal exchange, denied the characterization of our relationship, denied that anything she had done had contributed to my ankle setback. She retained her own attorney, a man named Davis who I will charitably describe as aggressive, and he sent a letter suggesting that my injury was the result of my own negligence in attending an event given my medical condition. My own negligence in attending my sister's baby shower on forearm crutches. My parents took Jolene's side completely. My dad stopped calling. My mother called twice, once to ask me to drop the claim for the sake of the family, and once, when I said no, to tell me that I was selfish and that Jolene was going through a very hard time. I would like to note that during this period, Jolene gave birth to a healthy baby girl. I would also like to note that I was not told about the birth until 3 days after it happened, in a group text sent to 14 family members. 4 months of depositions, evidence gathering, mediation attempts that went nowhere, and phone calls with Sandra. 4 months of my parents treating me like the person who had blown up the family rather than the person who had been knocked into a table and then billed for it. My ankle got better. Slower than it would have, but it got better. Dr. Date, Okafor was thorough and patient, and she testified in the deposition with the kind of clinical precision that left Davis very little room to work with. The mediation that finally succeeded happened in September, 11 months after the accident, 4 months after the shower. Jolene agreed to pay the venue's bill directly. She had always been the responsible party and the collections notice to me was dropped. She agreed to a settlement of $67,000 for the personal injury claim, covering documented additional medical costs, lost physical therapy progress and pain and suffering. $67,000, not a life-changing number in the abstract, but every dollar of my remaining PT costs through the end of the year, and then some. Sandra had pushed for more. I could have pushed for more, but I made the decision I made, and I have made peace with it. Davis sent a letter afterward noting that Jolene did not admit liability. Sandra said that's standard. I chose not to give it more space in my head than it deserved. Here is what I want to say about the money, because I know it's what people will focus on. $67,000 does not give me back the 4 to 6 weeks of physical recovery. It does not give me back the moment at the shower. It does not give me back the 3 days I didn't know my niece had been born. It does not fix my relationship with my parents, who, as of right now, have not acknowledged the outcome of the settlement and have not apologized. What it does is cover my costs. And there is something in that, in having the actual documented harm acknowledged in dollars and signed paperwork, that does a thing I didn't expect. It makes it real in a way that feelings alone couldn't. It says, this happened, it had a cost. That cost has been assigned to the person who caused it. I am not in contact with Jolene right now. I don't know if I ever will be again in any meaningful way. The sister I wanted, the one who would have said that night at the shower, I'm sorry, are you okay? That sister doesn't exist. I think part of me spent my whole life waiting for her to show up. And at some point you have to stop waiting. My parents and I have a monthly phone call that is polite and hollow and probably better than nothing. I don't know yet whether that's true. I'm still figuring it out. What I do know is this. 3 weeks ago, I walked Biscuit around the block without my crutches for the first time. Just to the end of the street and back, holding Dr. Okafor's arm, going slow. My left ankle hurt. It always hurts a little now, and probably always will. But I walked. I walked past the end of the block, past the corner, half the street, and then back. Biscuit looked up at me the whole time like I was doing something miraculous. I don't know. Maybe I was. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket on the way back. A text from Cassidy, how to go. I took a second before I answered. Stood at the edge of my driveway in the November cold, my left ankle aching, Biscuit sitting on my foot the way he does when he thinks I need company. I typed back, pretty good actually. And I meant it. I've thought a lot about what actually caused all of this. Not the crash on the interstate, that was a stranger falling asleep at the wheel, random and awful and no one's fault. I mean the rest of it, the shower, the tower, the 3 days I didn't know my niece existed. And what I keep coming back to is this. The harm didn't start the day Jolene's elbow hit that table. It started years before, in 100 smaller moments where someone should have said that's not okay and didn't. My parents didn't say it. I didn't say it. We all just adjusted the way you adjust to a slow leak. You put a towel down, you step around it, you tell yourself it's fine. And it compounds. That's the thing nobody warns you about. The things you let go don't actually go anywhere. They accumulate. Jolene is not a monster. I want to be careful about that, because it would be easier if she were. Monsters are simple. What Jolene is someone who was never asked to reckon with the cost of her behavior until a civil attorney put it in writing. And I think, if I'm honest, that the version of me who existed before the accident would have kept letting it go, would have driven home from that shower furious and hurt, cried to Cassidy, and then answered my phone the next time Jolene called. The accident changed me. Not in the way people mean when they say something like that. Not in a tidy, grateful, everything happens for a reason way. In a harder way. When your body fails you at 30, when you spend 14 weeks relearning how to exist in a body you used to take completely for granted, you run out of patience for pretending. You just do. There's only so much energy in a day, and you start choosing where it goes, with a precision you didn't have before. Filing that claim was the hardest thing I've done since physical therapy. Not because of the legal process. Sandra made that as manageable as it could be. Because of what it meant. It meant I was saying out loud, to my family, to my sister, to anyone who was watching, what happened to me was real, it had a cost, and I am not going to absorb that cost quietly to keep the peace. I had absorbed costs my whole life. I was done. The $67,000 is in a high-yield savings account. Most of it will go to medical expenses. Some of it won't, and I'm not going to pretend that doesn't feel like something. It feels like something. But the part I think about most isn't the money. It's the walk I took 3 weeks ago. Just to the end of the block and back, Dr. Okafor's hand on my arm, Biscuit trying to sit on my feet. My ankle hurt. It's always going to hurt a little probably. But I was walking. That's what I want people to understand, if they take anything from this. Not that the legal system worked, not that you should always fight back, not some tidy takeaway about toxic families, just that there is a version of yourself on the other side of the thing that's currently breaking you. She's slower than she used to be. Her ankle hurts. She takes her time. But she's walking.